Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, November 26, 2017. I'm Corey Stolzenbach. My guest today won 88 games in the major leagues, 51 saves. He pitched between 1961 and 1973, mostly with the Giants. He went to the World Series with them in 1962. He was an original Brewer, also finished his career with the Red Sox in 1973. He threw 4 consecutive no-hitters in high school, 2 in the minor leagues, and he had a 1.99 ERA in 1968. It is Bobby Bolin. And Bobby, thank you so much for joining me today. You were born in Hickory Grove, South Carolina, and you grew up on a farm. What kind of responsibilities did you have?
Well, growing up on the farm, you had all kind of feeding everything, milking the cows, doing this, doing that, and everything you do around a little old one-horse farm. So we just raised a few acres of cotton, a few acres of corn, till boll weevils got the cotton, and Dad had to go to work, so we stopped farming. So that was by the time I was about 15 or so. By that time, I was every minute I had, my brother and I was playing baseball.
Yes, your brother Billy Joe, you guys were battery mates because he was the catcher in the county league in York County.
Yeah. He played 1 year in the Baltimore Orioles minor league back in 58, I believe it was, 59.
Yes, you guys did have a baseball family. What got you into baseball in the first place? What made you want to play it?
Well, it was about the only thing you could do out on the farm. Our high school only had baseball and basketball. We didn't have football and track and nothing like that. We couldn't find anybody who wanted to run around the field without anywhere to go, so we didn't even have track. And so, but at home you could make a baseball out of strings that you took off fertilizer sacks. You could wrap up a cork or something like that and put some old black tape on it. So we played. We had a couple of 3 boys that lived up the road and a couple more, so we could play in the pasture a lot. And so up until I was an older teenager, we mainly played just rule around the house. Then we started, I guess, and we had a American Legion ball. I played in high school, and of course I played in the old county league you're talking about where my brother played in. I played that all summer. Then I played with some mill teams when I was about 15. They were in their 30s and 40s, but I played there, and my brother played some. So that's always, baseball was always something I just lived and breathed, I guess.
Yes, you played textile baseball for a mill team. You played for Blacksburg. What was this team's name? Did Blacksburg have a nickname? And what are some of your fondest memories playing for the mill team?
Well, the mill, I played for the Cherokee Falls. That was the mill a little south of Blacksburg. In fact, I think I was somewhere, I just finished high school. And I was playing with them up in Blacksburg. Before that, I'd play occasionally in the outfield. Then after I pitched so well in high school, they come down and got me one day, and I went up and pitched for the real team for the final game of the year, and we ended up winning the whole thing. And so it's got a big trophy put in the mill. The mill's shut down now. It's not a mill. We don't have many cotton mills in the South anymore.
How long did you play mill baseball, and what years specifically did you play for the mill team?
I just played 55 and 56, basically some for mills over there in Blacksburg, Cherokee Falls, in that area. So just right around Blacksburg. I wasn't really, because I was still 15, 16 years old, so I wasn't considered a regular.
Now, here's some irony, is that most of your career was with the Giants, but growing up, you were actually a Dodger fan who hated the Giants. So who were some of your favorite Dodger players?
All the way, I can remember all that. But, the old scout, Tim Murchison, Tim signed myself. Then he signed Gaylord Perry. Then he signed Dickie Dietz and Randy Huntley and Jimmy Ray Hart. He signed a bunch of guys out of the Carolinas. But I was telling him that, he come down there and sign me, talked to him about signing with the Giants, and I said, well, I'm not really interested in the Giants. They've been my enemy all these years. My brother was a Giant fan, I was a Dodger fan. And he said, I can't blame you, man. They got a great team. I wish anybody could play with them, but just can't everybody go out there? Because let me tell you what, if you want, do you want to play in the big leagues? If you sign, I said, well, sure. He said, okay, let me go over some of the guys the Dodgers have. They got a young guy named Sandy Koufax. They got a young guy named Don Drysdale. They got a guy named Johnny Potters. He started going through the whole Dodger pitching staff, and he said they're going to be there another 15 years or so, and so it's going to be tough to break in. But now the Giants, that's why I'm out here looking for pitchers. We only got one pitcher really good, Sal Macklin. He goes to the mountain with a crutch. And so he said, if you wanted to get to the big leagues, which team would you sign with? And so that made more sense to me than anything I ever heard, I guess. And so probably I ended up signing with a scout, not with the Giants. And he just happened to be with the Giants. So that's the way salesmen, I guess, should always operate. You're selling yourself, not the product you got.
Now, ironically, though, this wasn't actually your first go around signing a contract, because you were playing American Legion for Rock Hill, and your first contract was actually signed illegally. Branch Rickey, he was with the Pirates, and he said that if you didn't sign that contract, then no one was going to find you again. So that was actually null and void.
I think they still have American Legion rule. I'm not sure they had American Legion rule then. I know that if you played for American Legion team, which I played for Rock Hill Legion team, post 34, for 2 or 3 years I played with them. I still see a lot of them old Legion ball players. I get together about once a year. We have dinner over at the Rock Hill Country Club. But the Pirates had a scout live down below little town we was at. And actually he flew me and my dad to Pittsburgh on September the 9th, which the September the 10th, if the Major League team spends anything on a American League player before September the 10th, then they're totally fined and they give you an unconditional release. Well, I went up there and worked out with the Pirates, and they brought me in this long room with Branch Rickey. I remember, I don't know who all, let's see, Dick Sisler, and I don't know who all was in there. A lot of old, and let's see, the scouts, 2 or 3 scouts and several people that played and worked with the club. And Branch Rickey, of course, I guess he was there before he went over to the Dodgers. Then I said, I don't think, my dad and I was in the room, and I said, I can't sign this contract because all the other scouts told me they couldn't do anything till after September 10th. And so y'all flew, so I can't really sign anything until after that. And old Branch Rickey, he was sitting at the end of that long mahogany table with a cigar on his mouth. He just took that cigar out and laid it down and said, kid, either you sign that piece of paper or nobody will ever find you from what I hear where you live. I said, yes, sir. So I signed the thing, come on home. 10 days later, I got a release from Ford Frick saying they fined Pittsburgh so many dollars, and I was free to sign with anybody else except Pittsburgh. And Joe Brown never let me live that down. He was the general manager or front office with the Pittsburgh Pirates after I made the big leagues. But he wrote me several times, wanted the $3,000 back that he had given me, but the other scouts said, don't send it back. They knew what they were doing. So he never would speak to me. I'd walk right behind him at Old Forksville every time we was in town because the visiting team went up through the home team's dugout. And he would never, I'd say, hi, Mr. Brown. He would never say hi, never say nothing. But I don't know whether that American Legion rule is still in or not. It might be, I'm not sure.
But I understand, though, because I think you actually spent the bonus, or you spent the money before Commissioner Frick ruled this illegal. And so what did you spend the money on? And if you knew that was illegal in the first place, did you feel pressure by Branch Rickey? What were your reasons for signing the contract then, even if you knew that you couldn't do this?
Well, I figured he knew more than I did, and so I guess that's what my dad, he just would go along anything that we want to do. I was just a towhead kid that flew into Pittsburgh first time ever on an airplane with fire coming out of them engines. Thought I was going to die. And then, so when he said sign it, I said, well, it must be all right. They know I'll just take it. So when I got they gave me $3,000. That was more money than I've seen ever. I ended up buying me a car, paying off all Dad's debts, buying a new set of tires for him at the Western Auto Store, and then I got that thing from the Pirates wanted me to send the money back. And I saw the other scouts and they said, forget it. They knew what they were doing. They knew they was going to lose that money if they paid it because they knew it wasn't right. It was all illegal. So they was trying to sneak one through because I lived far back in the sticks down Dirt Road. In fact, Lefty Gomez one time when he was a Yankee scout, he drove all the way down there one day. I saw the car boiling up dust coming down the road. And I went out in the yard. He pulled up in the yard and he said, I'm looking for Bobby Bolin. I said, that's me. And so he said, I'm Lefty Gomez. I come down here to talk to you about signing with the Yankees. We want you to play for the Yankees. I said, no, sir, I'm not going to be no Yankee. And he said, all right, thank you, kid. Got back in the car and left. Later on, I got to the big leagues. Boy, he stretched that. He had a real yarn about that. How he'd traveled 2 days, 3 days down an old trail. Finally found me, and this kid run him off in the front yard with a shotgun. So it's kind of...
It sounds like you're pretty selective because at first when Tim Murchison, he signed you or made the attempt, you weren't interested in the Giants because you were a Dodger fan. And, Lefty Gomez, a legendary Yankee pitcher, a Hall of Famer, he was interested in signing you, but you weren't going to play for the Yankees. It sounds like you were pretty selective.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to... I didn't even think through about signing with the Yankees. I remember they talked to me one time about signing and playing the outfield, but it never did go any further than that. So after I'd made a commitment to old Tim, he's a wonderful old guy because he liked my mom's peach pie, and drank an iced tea on the front porch, sit there and just talk about everything but baseball. And he just built a friendship, and I guess that's how I ended up signing with the Giants.
Who were some of your favorite Dodgers growing up when you were younger?
Well, my favorite were like Duke Snyder, Pee Wee Reese, and Carl Furillo. I guess that Carl Erskine was pitcher back then. So Roy Campanella, guys like that. So I grew up with my brother. He was a Dodger fan. I was a Giant fan. So we knew all the Giants. He knew all the Giants. I knew all the Dodgers. And so back then there was Gil Hollis first base, Andy Pafko, and Carl Furillo in right field. So it was quite some teams back then. All we had was radios to listen to. We never did see no games. In fact, our high school back then, they'd let you out of class and go into the auditorium and watch World Series on a little old black and white TV. I don't think they'd do that today.
No, not quite. And plus, World Series was played in the daytime back then, and now it's all at night.
I saw Carl Erskine. I think he struck out 15 or 16 Yankees on there. That was probably 54, 55, I guess.
Yeah, well, it must have been 55 because the Giants were in the World Series and they won in 54. Yeah, 55 was when the Dodgers won it.
Giants beat the Indians.
Yeah, the Dodgers won their only championship in Brooklyn in 55. In high school, you threw 4 consecutive no-hitters, as I talked about earlier. That's quite a feat. Which year of high school were you when you threw these string of no-hitters, and which one meant the most to you?
That was in my senior year in high school. That was, and in fact, that's how the scouts started coming around so much. My high school principal, Cecil Ward, he's passed away last year. But he kept, I pitched a no-hitter, a one-hitter or something like that, and so he wrote the Charlotte Observer, and he'd write him, so you ought to come over and see this young kid pitching. Well, then after I pitched 4 no-hitters, I guess, he finally got him to come over, and they wrote a big article in the Charlotte Observer. The guy would come over and took a picture of me pitching and put it in the paper and wrote a story. Then from then on, it was 14 to 15 scouts a week at the house with the same deal. They'll give you $4,000 and that's it. Back then, if you went over 4,000, the club had to keep you on the bench on their 25-man roster. They couldn't send you to the minor leagues till 2 years, so you had to be ready to play in the big leagues. So I wasn't no way ready to play in the big leagues. I spent 4 years in the minor leagues trying to find where home plate was.
Yes.
I didn't really find it too well, because every league I led the league in wild pitches, walks, and hits batsmen for the first 4 years I played.
It's true you did.
Now when I see any old timer I played against, all they can talk about is I knocked them down all the time. They don't remember me pitching except knocking them down.
It's true that you did have some control issues. You were talking about the bonus baby rule earlier. Some are in the Hall of Fame. Most bonus babies didn't work out. But going back, it's a good thing you talked about the control issues, because I was going to bring that up. You had those in high school. You were a fastball pitcher, but I don't know, what kind of control problems specifically did you have? Was it wild pitches, inside, outside? Was it bouncing in the dirt? What kind of specific control problems did you have when you were young?
Well, getting it over that plate, anywhere. I didn't throw, mostly was inside. That's why I probably knocked so many down, because I threw sidearm, so the ball moved to the right when I threw that pitch. So if I throw it over the plate, it'd move in toward him. If I threw it off the plate, it moved into the ribs. So it was just kind of, it took me, I remember Larry Jansen, he wanted me to throw one time, when I got to the big leagues, he said, I want you to throw 4 pitches about knee-high over the outside, then we're going to throw 4 over knee-high on the inside. And I said, what's the punchline? I thought he was kidding, because to throw 4 pitches knee-high was, at one time, was something you'd dream about. Then later on, I got enough control to stay in the game anyway.
So with you being a fastball pitcher in high school, at least, what kind of fastball did you throw? Was it 2-seam, 4-seam? Was it both? And what other pitches did you have in your repertoire?
Yeah, no, I didn't have no repertoire of nothing except fastball. I threw it mainly across the seams. That's why it moved so much, I guess. And it's tough to go back. That's a long time ago when you start thinking about it. I remember pitching a little bit in high school. I can't remember many games in high school. My memory's kind of washed away from that, I guess. I remember hitting some guys, and I hurt them a lot, broke ribs, I guess, and sent them to the hospital and stuff like that, which that really, you didn't like that. That kind of, but I didn't really let it bother me that much, because they were standing up there 60 feet away, and they knew I was throwing.
So who do you credit for helping you get your control issues under, in order? Who do you help, under your belt? Who do you credit for helping you with your control problems?
Well, mainly just practice and throwing, like Jansen was a pitching coach. He was a good coach, and he taught me how to throw a slider, so then that way you had to come down on the ball a little bit more, and you had to not throw it as, just throw it. You had to be able to pitch it, a slider. And so I guess over the years, later on, I got where I could throw pretty good. Of course, I still missed inside a lot, because if you're a right-handed pitcher and your ball moves a little bit and you're trying to pitch inside, you end up hitting a lot of people, which you kind of, today, I'd probably warned or thrown out a game of Bob Gibson and I were talking one day, talking about how back when we pitched inside, had to. Fastball pitchers, I think, has to pitch inside, because if you get to leaning out over the plate, those big guys with strong arms today, I don't know how many home runs they'd hit if you just threw plain fastballs outside. Well, you can see most home runs are hit out there, about a little below the belt outside, where they can get them big arms out. And so the key thing, I think, control was just practice and learning to keep your eye on the target and don't move your head around as much. And kind of work on your movement a little bit so you're not as jerky.
You were talking about a pitching coach named Jansen. Was this Larry Jansen, the former Giant pitcher?
Larry Jansen, yeah. Did I say Jim? I meant Larry Jansen.
You said Jansen, yeah. Now, when was he your pitching coach? When in the minors, and what kind of?
Well, he was my pitching coach when I got to the Giants in '61, '61 through '69. He was my pitching coach. Then I got traded to Seattle.
Yes, and we'll talk more about that later. In the minor leagues, 1957, you debut for the Michigan City Whitecaps. You're in Class D. You had a pretty good year that year, 15-9, 3.53 ERA. You had a no-hitter August 12th of that year for them. You no-hit the Dubuque Packers. That was one of two no-hitters that you threw in the minor leagues. And then 2 years later, August 23rd, 1959, for Eugene, you threw a 13-0 no-hitter against the Lewiston Bronx in the Northwest League. So which no-hitter in the minor leagues meant the most to you and why? And how does that measure up compared to the 4 straight no-hitters you threw in high school?
Well, I remember one because I had bought me another car, and I had to run into the back of a bumper on another car. So I went down and traded it for a car, and the dealer said, you need a new tag, but just put that old tag on that a new car, then you can get your tag later. And so I done that, and that night I was taking Maddie and Lou and Manuel Mota, who were my teammates, and I was taking them back home from a barbecue the owner had. And so, I don't know, it was probably 10 o'clock at night I was driving, so I went back through a park and I was speeding. And I got up, and the police stopped me, took me to jail because they run the tag, and the tag was for another car, which that's the one I had just traded for. Traded from, so then they called the owner of the club, and he was pretty well under the weather, intoxicated-wise. And he kind of cussed out the sheriff, and so they locked me up for the night. They did not really lock me up. They set me over there on a bench and told me to stay there till somebody come and got me. So I didn't. Then I went down and got my tag straightened out. Then I went somewhere. Then I finally got to the ballpark about 4 or 5 o'clock, and then put on my uniform and went out, and then pitched a no-hitter that night. So I hadn't slept any for 2 days. So it was kind of, I remember that a lot.
Which no-hitter was this, the one in 57 or the one in 59?
That was the one in 57 when I was with Michigan City. Then, in 59, when I was with Eugene Emeralds, I guess that's the name of the...
Yes.
Roy Partee was our manager. Roy was a catcher. And so I had a terrible first half, and then he come in and said, listen, they want to send you back down. But I think if you drop your arm down, I was throwing almost overhand. If you drop that, I want you to drop down and start throwing sidearm. And I went from, I don't know what I was, like 4 and 6 the first half. I went to 16 and 2 the second half, and won 20 games in the minor league, which is unheard of. And so just drop it down a little bit. Probably Partee had me more than anybody as far as pitching, and I've learned how to control the ball a little bit better.
Yes, you did. In 1959, you won 20 and 8 to be exact. You had 2.84 ERA, 271 strikeouts. Just a fantastic season. You spent time between AA and AAA in 1960. So, is that what you credit, the fact that you changed your motion to a sidearm pitcher? Is that what you credit for being able to progress each year without having to repeat any years in the minors?
That's probably my best move, I think, when Partee moved me down a little bit. Now, the Giants didn't like it. They almost fired Partee because they didn't want a sidearm pitcher, I guess. Which I wasn't really... I was pretty well from 3/4 sidearm, I guess you'd call it.
Well, you stay as a sidearm pitcher in the majors, and you were not expecting to make the team in 1961 when you went to spring training, but Alvin Dark, he was the skipper at the time. He put you in a game of relief. The bases were loaded. There were no outs, and you managed to get out unscathed, no damage, made the team. Which team was this against in spring training? Do you know?
I think I struck out the side in the ninth inning, and that's probably toward the end of spring training. So that probably helped me make the ball club more than anything else.
What was your reaction when you found out you had made the team?
Well, that's kind of what I started out to do, and I was kind of surprised, and I kind of was, in a way that I figured after watching everybody else pitch and me pitch, I figured, gee, if they can do it, I can do it. And then I went up and I had some pretty good success my first few games, so that was, because Alvin always wanted a good fireballing right-hander to come out of the bullpen.
This is true, and in spring training, you were actually roommates with fellow South Carolinian and Billy Odell in 1961. So what kind of bond did you and Billy Odell have, and how often did you discuss South Carolina and home while rooming together?
Well, I walked into spring training in Phoenix, Arizona at the old hotel, and my roommate, they put me with Billy Odell, and that was in 1961, and today, I just talked to him a couple of days ago. I see him about once every 2 weeks. I used to go bird hunting with him a lot. Now we don't bird hunt anymore, kind of. No birds around here to hunt. But I still see him all the time. We still have a great friendship, great relationship. So that started, he got traded to Pittsburgh a little bit later after a couple of years. I was rooming with him some in the big leagues. But our friendship is still, he got great kids, so I see him and the kids are all the time now. His wife has died. Joan has passed away.
That's really too bad, but it's great that you still keep in contact with a former teammate and someone who is from South Carolina like you are. 61, you debut against the Reds, who would go on to win the pennant that year. You know, you pretty much had mop-up duty and relief. Most of your year in 61, you were a reliever and not so much of a starter. The Reds won that game 9-1. This was April 18th. You went the final 2 innings. You gave up 1 hit, struck out 2 and no runs. You know, and how about this? The first 2 players that you struck out in the major leagues were Frank Robinson and Wally Post. Those were 2 pretty good players. So, how nervous were you coming out of the bullpen to step onto the mound for your debut?
I almost had to rope my knees to get them from keep them shaking. First pitch I threw it over top of Frank Robinson's head. I thought I'd killed him. And then I finally turned around and rubbed the ball for about 3 or 4 minutes, looking out towards center field, saying, man, this got to settle down, boy. Don't hurt this guy. He's a Triple Crown winner. And so then I think I turned around. I don't know where I struck him out. I got him out, I think.
You did strike out Frank Robinson, yes, and also Wally Post, but he hadn't won the Triple Crown yet. He wouldn't win it until 66 when he was with the Orioles, and you retired the first 4 batters. Now, in your first big league start, it was the only one in 1961. You gave up 5 runs against the Phillies, even though the Giants won 8-5 on July 28th of that year. That was your first big league start. So what do you think was the biggest learning curve for you in 61, your first year with the team?
Well, I don't. Probably just being ready to pitch. Make sure your arm is. You don't do too much because you had to be ready, warmed up a lot. I got to warm up a lot. I don't know how many games I pitched in, but I warmed up quite a few games. Come in for a lot of times and 2 or 3 pitches, or I come in to face a right-hander and stuff like that. But in 62, I had a fairly good. Decent year in 62, I guess, with the Giants. I don't know what my record was.
Well, you started to get more pitching time, I guess, in 63 and beyond as far as the rotation goes. But that 62 Giants team was very special. They went to the World Series. When did you know how good they were in 62?
Well, the Dodgers were always right there. In fact, they were nip and tuck. We sat in the airport for I don't know how many years down the wire. I think 63 we sat in the airport, 64, 65, I forget one year, because I remember I pitched Saturday, and we were tied with the Dodgers, or one game behind. And they were playing the Phillies on Sunday. I shut out to Pittsburgh on Saturday, so we needed to win, and the Dodgers needed to lose on Sunday, and we'd play a playoff because we had tied the Dodgers. So we ended up winning Saturday and Sunday. And then the Dodgers, Koufax pitched the last game and beat the Phillies, so we went home. We sat out at the airport, had to wait to see if the Dodgers won or the Phillies won. So we done that, I don't know how many years, 2 or 3 years. The Dodgers were always right there, nip and tuck. The 62, the Dodgers were up by, I think, 5 games with 7 to play, and we ended up tying them. They lost, I forget how many games in a row, and we won. In the last game of the year, we won, and then I think, I'm not sure, where's the Cubs beat the Dodgers that day or something like that, and we ended up tying them. Then we had to play a 3-game playoff, best 2 out of 3. And so the Dodgers are leading like, I don't know, and Dodgers stayed at top of the ninth. And we were trailing 4-2 or something, and down by 2 or 3 runs. We ended up scoring 3-4 runs in the ninth inning, and ended up beating them and winning. And I was warming up to pitch to Tommy Davis. I'll never forget that. I was Billy Pierce was pitching in relief, and he got out. I forget who the guy. Let's see, Waters, I think, or I forget who he got out. But the next hitter was Tommy Davis, and I was supposed to pitch to Davis. And man, I was so happy Pierce got that guy out. Even though Tommy, I had fairly good success, but the guy hit, I think, 346, 356 that year. But those are good old days back in those days. Maury Wills, that was in the era when he was stealing 100 bases. I tell you, it's quite a Koufax was the most phenomenal pitcher to watch you ever seen. That was one of the biggest memories against Koufax. I get a base hit off of him one night in L.A., and I thought, man, this has got to be glory.
You guys did tie for first place, yes, but I'm asking though, when did you know the Giants were good though? When did you know that the Giants were going to be good in '62? When did you know this team was going to go places?
Well, just from the get-go, you had Mays, and you had Cepeda, and you had Willie McCovey, and so you had some unbelievable guys out there. Then you had Marshall pitching. And then back then they had Jack Sanford pitching, I think, Mike McCormick, and I forget who else. But offhand, Billy Pierce had an unbelievable year that year. I think he'd won, I forget how many games at Candlestick Park in a row. But we had some great ball players. And that's why the Dodgers had such a great pitching staff. It just, those guys that old Tim Mercer was telling me about were still pitching. In the late 70s, the late 60s, they were still down there, so it'd been tough to break into that club.
Yes, it was, and you guys would go wire to wire for a long time. We'll talk about 65 in a bit, because that was one crazy September, but let's talk about the best of 3 series, as you guys both finished at 101 and 61. This was the first year that the National League moved to a 162-game schedule after previously playing 154. And the American League started the 162 schedule the year before in 61. You guys won the first game 8-0 at Candlestick, but you appeared in Game 2, because that was the only one of the 3 games that you guys appeared in, that you appeared in at least. You got the loss 8-7 in Game 2 at Dodger Stadium. That was the only one. You know, you worked around a 1-out walk in the bottom of the 8th. You talked about Maury Wills, who won the MVP that year. He stole 104 bases, which was then a Major League record. You walked him to lead it off in the bottom of the 9th, and you get yanked for Dick LeMay. And, hey, LeMay, he was the one that was on there. Gaylord Perry, Mike McCormick, like you said. The Dodgers did the damage against those pitchers, but you got the loss because you were responsible. And Ron Fairley won it when he hit a sacrifice to center to score Maury Wills. And so I'm just wondering, if you felt that you could have gotten out of that situation. Do you feel like you could have been able to handle the Dodgers if Alvin Dark kept you in? Or do you think you made the right move going to Dick LeMay? Take me back to that Game 2 right there.
Yeah, I don't. I remember it, but I know I got the loss. But the wheels, I guess they figured because I had such a long stride that wheels could steal off something me better, easier than anybody else. Like Dick LeMay, left-hander, brought him in the pitch to. I forget who was. I don't even know who was hitting. Ron Fairley somewhere hit in there, but I don't remember who was hitting. But the Junior Gilliam or somebody probably. But when I guess when somebody takes you out, you just go right. You don't have no right to say, Skip, I want to stay out here because it's over when he walks out and taps that arm. There's no point. It's like umpire calling the ball full with a pitch down the middle. What are you going to say? I know it's a strike, but that don't mean nothing. And so I knew I could get the next hitter out, but you're always thinking that anyway, so you don't really bother you with it. Except sometimes you might tear your uniform off when you get in the clubhouse, but it don't bother you that much.
Well, Fairley was the one who hit the sacrifice fly that scored Wills to win the game, but how relieved were you when they had won? You guys won the pennant in Game 3 by a 6-4 score. I know you were very happy. How relieved did you feel in that moment?
Well, I was with somebody not too long ago could replay that whole thing, but I don't remember that much. I remember Harvey Keene got on base, Davenport got on base, we scored 4 runs, so it was kind of everything we hit was a little blooper in there, our line drive in there, a ground ball in the hole, and had a couple errors. I forget second baseman made an error, and a shortstop made an error, and so it was kind of a. Then when we ended up scoring 2 runs, I think we were down by 2 and then scored 4, so we were up by 2. So I think Billy Pierce went in to pitch. Billy had an unbelievable year. He was my roommate. He was the greatest guy in the world. But I can remember when Lee Walls, I guess, is the last guy when he flied out to left field. I was so happy because I was warming up in the bullpen. I was going to bring me back in after Pierce faced that hitter. So it was kind of I don't know. I see all these guys running around now, jumping up and down like a little bunch of kids, but I don't remember none of that. I remember we were excited, running around shaking everybody's hand, but I don't remember jumping up and down like kids with ants in their pants. But I think the main thing that you'd work went all year toe to toe, neck to neck, and the Dodgers. Every day you read what the Dodgers done, or look at on the scoreboard, see what the Dodgers done. So for a few years in there, it was just us and the Dodgers. And Cincinnati come along, and that big red machine, man, they started making it happen. And then all of a sudden, the Cardinals come in there. So it was I don't remember too much more about that 62 game, but I had a guy the other day replayed the whole thing to me, and I said, well, I remember being there, but that's been 62 from, this is 17, so it was actually several years ago.
Yeah, Billy Pierce had an amazing year that year. I believe he finished 3rd in Cy Young voting when there was only one Cy Young, because Don Drysdale won the Cy Young that year, and I believe Bob Purkey finished 2nd. But Pierce, he really was your ace that season. And so you get to the World Series because of of course, who else but the Yankees. They were the team in that era. And so I guess my first question to you is, before we talk about your appearances in that World Series, what you were thinking going into that World Series, because you're facing the Yankees, who Lefty Gomez tried to sign you, asking if you wanted to become a Yankee, and then you turned him down, you said no. And so I guess what your thoughts were going through your mind when you found out this is who you're going to be facing, knowing that it could have been the other team that you were pitching for that year.
Yeah, I pitched against the Yankees in 61. We had an exhibition game in Yankee Stadium. I forget, I don't know, I think I gave up a run. Mickey Mantle hit a home run first inning. I threw 2 fastballs right by him, and he kept fouling off. Finally hit just a screaming line drive over the bullpen. And so I think I think I pitched 5-6 innings in an exhibition game. It was always a policeman's benefit game they had once a year back in the old days. They still kept it for a few years there after the Giants moved west. And so up until that, when you walk in and see that Yankee Stadium back in those days, see where all the Babe Ruths and everybody played, you kind of in awe. And so we go in there in the Yankee Stadium, it was like, 74,000. They were sold out every game we played in the World Series. So it was kind of pandemonium. It was really, so I pitched in, I think 2 games. One of them was all right. I come in relief and got out of the inning. And next couple innings, I see a replay of it all the time on another thing. I gave up 2 or 3 ground ball singles. Then they Alvin brought in Don Larson.
You're referring to... Go ahead, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I brought in Don Larson back then. He had that great slider, man. He done a great job for us that year also.
Yes, you pitched in games 3 and 4, and 4 was when you had the struggles, but you pitched in the bottom of the 8th at Yankee Stadium in game 3. The Giants lost that game 3-2, but you had a 1-2-3 inning. You retired Tony Kubek, you retired Bobby Richardson, you struck out Tom Tresh. What did you think went right for you in that game 3 and that appearance?
Well, I don't remember too much about it except that pitching in a game like that. But you don't really think about the outside. You're always thinking about concentrating on what you're doing. People wonder about, all the screaming people and everything. And you hear them as long as you're not working, but when you go to get the sign and get started, you don't hear any sound anymore. It's all just you. And so I had fairly good success, except they got base hits. But it was, pitch by pitch, I can remember, I think Hobie Landreth was catching, I believe. I believe he was still, no, Tom Haller, might have been Tom, and Ed Bailey, I think, was our catchers that year when we won the pennant. I think they both hit 20 home runs apiece, something like that, which was an oddity. Catching hit 40 home runs between them.
Wasn't Joe Pignatano on that squad too, or no? Was he gone before then?
I don't think he was there. He might have not been there yet. He might have come later, I think, because let's see, Elston Howard played first. Moose Darren played. He played first. But that's a lot of times. I remember Richardson and then Tony. Let's see, and he had another guy. I forget the infielders. I think that's who I come in to pitch to and struck out one inning.
Yes, you struck out Tresh in Game 3, and Game 4 was when you had the struggles. Marichal had pitched, he started, and you relieved him for 1 2/3 innings, and you stranded men on base, 2 men on the bottom of the 5th, but then you later ran into trouble. You had back-to-back one-out walks against Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, and they scored on consecutive RBI singles in the bottom of the 6th. 2 outs from Bill Skowron and Clete Boyer, and then you were pulled for Don Larson. What do you think was the reason that you ran into trouble there in that 4th game?
I don't know. You never could figure out. You just make, whether it was a good pitch or bad pitch. I remember I see replays of it. There's a ground ball in the hole, shortstop. Then another ground ball up the middle, or 2 ground balls in the hole. I forget what it was. They could have been at the shortstop instead of in the hole very easily. So it was just bad pitches. They just hit the ball.
We all know.
On a bad pitcher.
We all know about Game 7. You lost 1-0. William McCovey hitting that ball, and Bobby Richardson catching it. If you had hit just a little higher, Felipe Alou would have scored. Willie Mays would have scored. You guys would have been the world champs. That's a tough way to lose the World Series. What do you think could have been done differently in that World Series for you guys to win?
We reminisce about that a lot. I see Bobby Richardson a lot. I see him every month or so. We're always talking about the line drive by McCovey. But it's almost unbelievable. I didn't figure they'd pitch to McCovey. I figured they'd walk McCovey with the man on second, third. But they ended up pitching to him. They didn't want to pitch to Spada, who was coming up behind him, because they were scared of a wild pitch or something, because Ralph Terry threw a lot of curveballs in the dirt. So that was the theory behind letting McCovey hit. But when he hit, I thought we'd won. I jumped up by the time I fell back on the bench, we'd lost the game. So it was all over.
So what do you think could have been done differently then to win the World Series during that Fall Classic? What do you think the Giants could have done differently that series?
Well, probably could have hit more. I think we had a batting average of under 200. But, of course, you got the Yankee pitching he pitched 2 games, I think. And I think, I don't hardly remember. I remember Ralph Terry pitching the last game when he won. Jack Sanford had pitched, Billy O'Dell was pitching at the end, because Bobby Richardson always talks about, if I hadn't caught that ball, Billy O'Dell would have won, and that would have made his 20th game of the year, because he won 19 that year. He'd been a 20-game winner, and we'd have lost the World Series.
Yeah, Richardson lives in South Carolina, and Sanford started that Game 7. Now, you were telling me before we were setting up this interview that you actually went to boot camp after the 1962 World Series. What was that about? How did that come about?
Well, I was in the National Guard, and so they figured that if I just go into boot camp and get my 6 months out of the way, I might be better off. And so that was what the captain told me in the Guard. So it ended up really close, because I thought I was going to miss the World Series by going to boot camp. But the day after boot camp, I flew to Phoenix, Arizona, and the National Guard. I don't even know the process. I think I got sworn in, got on a troop train, come back to Fort Ord, and then we lined up and went into boot camp. About 3 days later, they blockaded Cuba and put us on wartime maneuvers. And everybody thought we was going to go to war somewhere or another. And so I thought, oh, Lord, I'm going to be in here for life. And so I went through boot camp there at Fort Ord for 10 weeks. Then I got transferred to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Stayed there and by that time, the Cuban Missile Crisis was over. Khrushchev had pulled out everything, and now it's back to peacetime. So through January and February, wasn't nothing happening. So they cut the budget back, and so they wanted everybody out that wasn't going to re-up for 3 years. And so if I wanted to re-up for 3 years, I could stay, or I could get a discharge and go home. And I said, well, I think I'll go back to spring training. And so I took my discharge, and I went back to Phoenix. Just caught the Giants right before they left spring training. And then finished up spring training with the Giants, and then that was my military career. And, but I was a platoon squad leader, and I was gung-ho, because I figured if somebody said something, you do it. And the only people that ever has trouble in the military is not following orders. So I didn't have no problem following orders, but I enjoyed my stint in there, though. It was and I think everybody, I'm one of those guys that thinks everybody get out of high school, they ought to go to boot camp for at least 8 weeks. At least they learn how to say yes, sir, no, sir, and what's right or what's wrong.
Did you enlist? Did you sign up yourself?
Yeah, I signed up for the National Guard. I think, I was an NG, yeah.
Okay, so you signed up yourself then. You weren't drafted or anything, or? You signed up yourself, correct? You were not drafted, you volunteered?
Yeah, I just signed up to go get my 6 months out of the way, mainly because I think a lot of athletes were doing that about that time. Most of the Giants minor league team was doing that. And the younger guys, John Orsino was in there. Gaylord Perry and I, we done our 2 weeks duty during the summertime. But that was going about before the Vietnam War started, I guess. And then Vietnam come along about 65. I figured I'd go in and they called all the units up around where we were at, but they never did call our unit up. And so I missed going to Vietnam by, I don't know, several times. This squad went and that squad went and my squad didn't.
Okay, so you could have been drafted into Vietnam, but you weren't.
Excuse me?
You could have been drafted into Vietnam, but you did not get drafted?
Yes, I very easily could have been there if they'd have called our unit up, but they didn't call our particular unit up in Vietnam because we were I was in a 105 howitzer shooting 105s. I was good at that, but they didn't use 105s that much in Vietnam. They couldn't get them around that easy.
So the only military experience you had was, I guess, that boot camp in the National Guard. Is that the only military experience you had there in that off-season after 62? That's the only military experience you had? Okay.
Yeah, that was my career.
Okay. Now, getting back to things in 63, you get more of a starter role, and what did it mean to you to have that starting role in 1963, to have more of the rotation then?
Yeah, well, I never did figure I had one because always I was filling in for another starter or a doubleheader when I was pitching, and so I always started when they needed a starter and I relieved when they needed a reliever. Alvin Dark said I was the best guy in the world for a manager to have because I'd pitch long, I'd pitch short, I'd start, and so I never did really have a role till I sent up Milwaukee. I started most of the time when I pitched for Milwaukee, the Brewers. Then I went over to the Red Sox. I immediately went to the bullpen, and so I never did start another game.
Oh, but you did start quite a bit, though. I mean, in 1964, you had 5 complete games. You had 10 complete games in 1966. And in 64, you had 3 shutouts. In 66, you had 4 shutouts. So, I mean, you did have quite a bit of a starter role there in that mid-60s. So what made you so durable?
A few years there, I started quite a few games.
What made you so durable that you were able to have that kind of stuff in you? How were you able to... because back then you finished what you started, of course, but I mean, what made you so durable, and how were you able to shut the other team out so much?
I don't know. I said God blessed me with a strong right arm that never did have any problem with it, so I could pitch today or tomorrow. I rested to start the game and then rested. I could always pitch another. So I always pitched on 3 days rest. Never did have 4 days rest when you started, so back then you just went with 4 guys instead of 5, 6 starters. You just had 4. And then if you wasn't in the rotation, we always had double headers a lot of times. So somebody would have to work in on one of those games. So I was always the guy for that. Back we had Marshall and Sanford and McCormick, and that year we had Pierce one year, and Billy Odell was another starter. Then I forget who else. Everybody was started, but I was the guy that could come in and the first inning, 3rd inning, 5th inning, 8th inning. And so Alvin said that was the kind of guy that every manager wants. So I figured, yeah, but it's not the kind of guy the player wants to be.
Well, you had some great years between 1963 and 1966, and out of those 4 seasons, which do you think was your best one and why? Seemed like my best is the one I won 11 and lost 10. I forget what year that was, 64 or 5, I believe. I don't forget what year Gibson and I was lowest ERA. That was 66, I believe, or something like that. Well, that was 68. That was 68 when you had the 1.99 and he had the 1.12.
Yeah. The one year I won 11 and lost 10. That's probably my best year. because I don't know how many games I lost 2-1 or got out of the game when it was 0-0. I'd pitch against Koufax every time, and then he'd hang up zeros, and the only way I could stay in the game was hang up zeros. And then they'd always pinch hit for me about the 7th, 8th inning. I never did get no decisions. I didn't have many decisions. That's probably the best year I ever had, though.
Yeah, they
I end up pitching. A lot of times I'd pitch 8, 9 innings, nothing. Then they'd bring somebody else in. They'd give up a run to tie it. So I can remember another game I pitched one time. It was a young kid nobody ever heard of named Rusty Staub.
Oh, yeah. LeGrand Orange,
Houston Astros had it. That was in early. I pitched, I think it was the bottom of the 9th, and Staub's, they were going to pitch hit him. Some kid, they were going to pitch hit named Rusty Staub. Alvin come running out and said, who knows this guy? Nobody knew him. So Alvin said, just bust him inside with a fastball. He won't hit your fastball. Hit it over the right center field fence. Tied the game up 1-1, and we only played 10, 12 innings. But that's the first time anybody ever saw Rusty Staub's. But I think he made quite a racket after that.
Yeah, Rusty had a great career, more than 2,700 hits. He was an all-star 5 times, 6 times.
Yeah.
Well, now he's not in the Hall of Fame, but he still had a fantastic career. That was in 1966 when you went 11-10. That was that year. But you really, against the Cubs especially, you had some great games. June 12th of '63, you had 14 strikeouts. July 11th of '64, you had a shutout at Wrigley Field. And October 2nd of '64 against them, I believe, you had 13 strikeouts and a shutout. But let's talk about 1965. And usually, if you win 14 games in a row, especially in September, like you guys did, usually that means a trip to the World Series like it did back then. But this was just so crazy because that was the year Willie Mays won the MVP. He had 52 home runs, okay? You guys won 14 in a row. The Dodgers, though, they won 13 in a row in September, and they won 15 of the last 16 to win the pennant. And so you guys were up by 4 games towards the later end of September. What do you think, how did it all go wrong for you guys that year in '65 when you guys lost the pennant to the Dodgers? Because you guys were hot, they were hot, but they ended up winning the pennant. Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, that's the game of baseball. I don't know. A lot of times we had a lot of big hitters on the ball club. So any pitcher's having a good game, he will pitch around the good hitters, and then if the other guys is hitting, if the 250 hitters don't come through, and that was kind of the way the Giants, the pitchers would do us a lot of times, and how we would get through a lot of long winning streaks. Now we had some like that, but because we end up walking Mays or pitching around Mays and Cepeda and McCovey, if you can get the other guys out, you're in good shape. But when we winning is when they pitching those guys and Mays hitting the ball, because I think he hit 52. I think one year he hit. That might have been the year he hit 4 home runs in Milwaukee in County Stadium. 4 home runs in one game, I think. I think that was 64, before they moved to Atlanta. When they moved to Atlanta, 65, I'm not sure.
66 was their first year in Atlanta.
So 65, I believe Mays hit 4 home runs in Milwaukee, I think. And should have hit the 5th one because it was right back up on the warning track. So a lot of things, home runs. You remember a guy named Tony Cloninger?
Yeah, he was the one who hit the 2 grand slams in one game, July 3rd of '66. I think that was against the Giants. That was Bob Purdy and Ray Sadecki. Yeah.
He hit the first one against Ron Herbel. I don't know who. Then the ironic thing about it, he come up with the bases loaded again about the 8th inning or something like that, in a long fly ball left center, almost hit 3 grand slams. That'd have been all kind of records. Then we go to Atlanta a week later, and the first time up, he hits a home run up in the center field seats. So we finally figured out, don't throw him a high fastball.
I thought it was Purdy and Sadecki who gave up those grand slams. Bob Purdy, Ray Sadecki, I thought those were the ones who gave up the grand slams. to Cloninger.
Yeah, he hit one against Ron Herbal. I forget who he hit the second one against, but I think then he drove in another run with a base hit, a single, so he drove in 9 runs that day.
It sure was impressive, and between 65 and 66, you guys finished in second place in each of those 4 years. 4 years in a row you had second place finishes, and you guys were very close. You lost by 1.5 games, the pennant in 66 to the Dodgers again. The Cardinals, they ran away with it in 67 and 68. Between 65 and 68, Bobby, which team, Giants team, do you think was the best, and do you think had the best chance of winning the World Series, those second-place teams?
Well, I think the 65 team probably was and I can't go back and remember that much, but I know we had every year our big bombers. As long as they were hitting, boy, we were in great shape because we had Marshall pitching all the time. You know he was going to win 20, 25 games. Then Gaylord come along, then he was winning 18 to 20 games. So we had 2 big guns, and then Herman I'd start 10 starts in a row, then I'd relieve 5 times in a row. I was the only guy who would pitch and relieve without squabbling that much. Because most guys, if they pitched, they didn't want to go to bullpen. And so some of those years, I know the 65 ball club, 66 ball club was really a good ball club. That year Mays hit all them home runs. I always tell everybody, because I think I hit a home run that year. I always tell everybody, between Mays and I, we hit 53 home runs together.
Well,
he had pitched 2 and I hit 1.
65 was the year that Mays hit those 52 homers, though. It was 65 that he hit those 52 homers. But hey, now you bring that up, you weren't that bad of a hitter yourself. You hit 6 home runs in your career. What was it that you were able to hit those home runs? You had an affinity for the long ball in your career as a pitcher.
Well, I enjoyed hitting. I was a pretty good hitter when I first got there. Then after you pitch a while, and then as wild as I was knocking everybody down, the only thing I'd done was dodge pitches when I come up later on. So it wasn't no problem with them. You wouldn't be able to set yourself to hit nothing because you'd always get knocked down or brushed back or somebody throwing you a breaking ball. And so throwing a pitcher a breaking ball, like for me, it was like the old saying, Mom, I'll be home next week. They start curving the ball now. But I didn't hit the curveball too well. But fastballs I can hit pretty good.
You talked about Herman Franks. Yes, he would take over from Alvin Dark. This would be in the mid-'60s. Franks was the manager. And so I understand we're going to, this is later in the 60s. You pitch a doubleheader, I guess. There was supposed to be a doubleheader in St. Louis, and it was supposed to be between Juan Marichal and Bob Gibson, but apparently you got booed by the Cardinal faithful because they wanted Juan Marichal instead. And so you got the ball for Game 1 of the doubleheader at Busch Stadium, and you actually won 3-2. So for what reasons did Herman Franks give you the ball, and what did it mean to outduel Bob Gibson in that game?
Well, I didn't think I was pitching. I knew Juan was pitching, so when Herman come up and flipped me the ball, I said, what's this for? He said, ain't no way I'm going to start Juan against Gibson. That was a whole big deal. There was 40-some thousand there at Busch Stadium that day because they'd come to see the duel of the decade, Marichal versus Gibson. They'd never pitched against one another. And so that was a big deal, and everybody come to see the big deal. And so not only was it a doubleheader, but it was going to be a Marichal against Gibson. So now when they come down, they start. I didn't even go out for batting practice today. I just stayed inside. And 15 minutes before the start, I got my catcher and we went to the bullpen. And when I'm going down there, you hear the fans, because they're good fans in St. Louis. They start rambling, that ain't Juan Marichal, that's 42, that's another guy. And so by the time they announced my name, I hit ninth and pitching for the Giants. Number 42, Bob, they booed me for 5 minutes, threw stuff on the field. It was because they wanted to see Marichal pitch against Gibson. So when I went out and they in the first inning to pitch. They booed me again, and they booed me every time I come up to bat. Last time I come up to bat is probably the 7th or 8th inning. I forget what it was. My third time at bat, they kind of didn't boo me as much, but that was the biggest boo I ever had. Got to end up winning the game. I think Frank Lindsay come in and saved it.
Yes, you won 3-2, and you beat Bob Gibson. So, do you think maybe all the boos that motivated you in that game? Do you think?
Yeah, Juan pitched the second game, and he won 9-8. I think. I'm not sure what the score was, but I think it was 9-8.
But how motivated were you though by the boos?
Oh, that motivated me. It just made me madder and madder. That probably helped me pitch more than anything the boos did. Instead of getting me down, it perked me up. So that probably helped me more than anything.
That was the year that
only thing you had to do is hit against Gibson, and well, that's a toughie.
Yeah, he had that 1.12 ERA that year, and you had the 1.99. And you know, the year before in 1967 was a rough year. You had a 4.88 ERA, and in 68 you had a 1.99. So how were you able to bounce back to your seasons before 67 and 1968? What do you think the reason was for your 67 struggles, and how were you able to get back there in 68 to being a better pitcher?
Yeah, I don't really know. I know, let's see, 1 year, which 67 was a terrible year, I think.
Yes, 4.88 ERA.
Was that Herman Frank still there?
Yes.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, Herman. He'd like to have me ready to pitch. He didn't care about me starting. He just wanted me to be ready and come out of the bullpen. So I started, and so I had a couple of years there when Sanford was gone, and then I pitched in rotation. But it kind of seemed like that year there wasn't no really rotation to get in. I never did get in the rotation to pitch, and I pitched in a lot of games, but I don't know. I didn't. You can't figure out. I could never figure out how in the world I end up with that kind of a record sandwiched in between two good years, because I don't know as I done anything different. It's just a game of ball, I guess.
But then they lowered the mound after 1968, largely because of the season that Gibson had. And so how much of an impact do you think lowering the mound had on you in 69?
I never did notice it, because the groundkeeper, they didn't lower it but an inch or so. They made a big deal out of it. It wasn't no big thing, because all the groundskeeper had to do is slant it the same way. And so I don't know, I don't think they're lowering it right now, and the hitters seem to be having a field day with home runs and stuff.
You were traded in December of 69 to Seattle. At the time, they were still the Pilots. Dick Simpson, Steve Whitaker, they went the other way. How tough was it for you personally when you were dealt from San Francisco to Seattle?
Well, it was kind of after I think Clyde King was the manager or something like that. I don't know why Clyde and I never saw eye to eye on anything, but and I figured they'd trade me for somebody. And so Dave Bristol, who was the new manager of Seattle, called me, and hey, he called me before Giants did. He told me I was a Seattle Pilot. And I thought that was odd after all them years with the Giants. Nobody called me saying they was going to trade me or did trade me, but ended up the manager of the Seattle Pilots called me and said, hey, I'm glad to have you, boy. He was one of my first guys I wanted to get up here. And I didn't really say anything because it kind of surprised me. And so then I went on that year to Seattle. We got sold, 3 days, 4 days, or a week before the season started, we become Milwaukee Brewers. And in fact, my car was packed and headed on a freight train to Seattle. And I didn't get the car in Milwaukee till about 6-8 weeks later. And so we got to Milwaukee. I think it was snow on the ground when we got there at County Stadium.
Yes, and Bud Selig had bought the team, and he wanted to return baseball to Milwaukee, and that was just a crazy offseason. You guys weren't sure what was going to happen. You weren't sure if you're going to stay in Seattle, if you're going to move to Milwaukee, because Selig himself, he wanted to change the colors from the old minor league Brewers. When the Milwaukee Brewers were a minor league team, their colors were red and navy, and so he wanted to change them, but he kept the old Pilots colors with the Brewers, and they've stayed that way since. But I'm just wondering, did you have a preference as far as if you want the team to be in Seattle or Milwaukee?
Well, I was going to probably, I'd already settled in to play in Seattle. I had played in Eugene, Oregon in the minor leagues, which is right down the road. And I'd also played in Tacoma, Washington in the minor leagues with the Giants, AAA team. So I knew it was going to be a rainy season and everything. But summers were really nice. But Milwaukee I didn't mind because I enjoyed Milwaukee while I was there. Great fishing up on the Little Wolf and the Big Wolf. Smallmouth bass was really good. Had some friends there that went up, took me fishing a lot. And so we didn't have much. We had kind of an expansion team. Everybody was new. I think we must have used 10, 12 third basemen that year. And so it was kind of you met a lot of new teammates all the time because they were always coming in and out.
Well, you didn't spend the whole season with the Brewers because you were traded in September of 1970.
I got sold, I think, to Boston. I think Milwaukee needed money to pay their salary or something because them guys didn't have no money. Selig and nobody. I always said, I don't know how they're going to make it with a used car salesman and everything. And I don't know whether they can raise enough money to keep everything going. And so I ended up leaving there, going to Boston, and ended up with a great guy, Eddie Casco there. He just brought me out of the bullpen. From then on, I never always pitched. And then I was a kind of a closer for Milwaukee, for the Red Sox the last 2 or 3 years.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And Casco, yeah, he was a pretty good player with the Reds in the early 60s. But, hey, in 1970 with the Red Sox, you finished the season 2-0. You had ERA of 0 and 2 saves in relief for the Red Sox. So what do you think was the biggest thing to a fresh start in Boston?
Yep, I don't know. I think just thinking somebody might want me. And I was throwing really good when I left Milwaukee. I kind of had a little spur on my arm. And it got better, and so I was really throwing good when I left Milwaukee. So I got over to Boston, and the only thing I do is come in and relief pitching in it or something like that. So that always worked good for me, coming in and pitched 2 or 3 guys or something like that. So that's how I stayed with the Red Sox. The remainder, I had a great year in 73, and so when I went to spring training in 74, I didn't even have a job. They had a new manager, and he wanted to have all his own guys instead of old guys. So he got rid of all the old people, me and Aparicio and Cepeda. We all got canned about within an hour in spring training, about 3 or 4 days before the season started. And I just got in the car and left, and I didn't even go back into a ballpark for about 5 years.
Were there any teams in 74 that reached out to you, or was that it?
Never did hear from anybody. They didn't have my phone number. I was in a motorhome, and I just took off and went to Montana fishing. I figured I stayed around for about 3 or 4 days. I called a couple, but everybody had their team set. It was 3 days before the season opened. And so everybody, ones I talked to said, well, if you go to the minor leagues and pitch a little while till we find out which young guys we want to keep. And I figured, well, I went through all that for years. I'm going home, go fishing. So I went to Montana and caught trout. It was the best trout fishing you ever seen.
And you probably could have helped the team in 74, Bobby, because in 72 you had 5 saves, 2.93 ERA. The next season, in 73, you had 15 saves, a 2.70 ERA. I mean, you still probably could have helped some team out, I could imagine.
Well, yeah, I thought I could, but it wasn't. No, after they released me, then you got to re-sign for money, and they all try to sign into minimum salary. back then there wasn't no good salaries around anywhere.
Yes, the game has changed a lot since the 70s, that's for sure. I know that you said just now that you went to Montana, you did trout fishing. What else did you do? What kind of line of work did you look into after it was all said and done? What kind of...
After that, I've been in the Amway business for 35 years, I guess, or so. That's all I've ever done. Travel around the country and
Amway?
show people how to make money.
Amway, you said? Okay.
Yeah. That was my total. Didn't make nothing from baseball, so I didn't. This was the only thing I know of after I left the game that I knew I could do. And all you had to do is show people how to wash clothes.
What kind of second job did you maybe have in the off season when you played?
Never did have a job, but I bird hunted every day, so that was my job. I've quail hunted about every day. Odell and I or somebody we was hunting together all the time. So that's how I kept my legs in shape, but I never did earn no money from it. I didn't get many birds either. We've now lost all of our birds around the South.
You're also a member of the South Carolina Sports Hall of Fame, class of 2008. What did that honor mean to you?
Well, it's good to thank somebody and recognize you and thank you well enough to make the State Hall of Fame. That was good. I was already made my high school Hall of Fame in the county. I made the county Hall of Fame also, so that was good.
Yes, it is. And what was in your induction speech in the South Carolina Sports Hall of Fame?
I don't remember, just recognizing the people that helped me get there. My high school coach, my high school principal. Actually, Alvin Dart was there, so I got to talk about him. Because Alvin lived here in Easley, where I live, for the last 30 years. He died last year.
Yes, Alvin Dart did pass away. I think Alvin passed away in 2014, I think.
Yeah, it has been 2 years. Be coming up on a great day. That's hard to believe. December, I guess, or November of 14. Is that right? I thought it was sooner than that, but I guess so.
I think it was 14, yeah, but yeah, time does fly fast. I know you still keep in contact with Odell. You still talk to Richardson. What else do you do now that you're retired?
Well, I don't do Arizona a while in the spring. I go with Gaylord Perry, lives up the road here from me, so I say Gaylord about every once a month, so we'll have lunch somewhere. So I try to get together with him and Odell and Bobby Richardson, and we'll have a few guys around. And then Sam Weiss, who was a football player with the coach at Cincinnati, played at Cincinnati, coached Super Bowl over time. He lives here. We go to church together. So him and Gaylord and Bobby Richardson, Billy Odell, we'll meet and get together every once in a while.
That's great.
The world deal turning.
That's really great. Yeah, Sam White coached the Bengals in Super Bowl 23, but they lost to the 49ers and Joe Montana. But that's really wonderful.
Caught the pass in the end zone, yeah.
Yeah, that was John Taylor who caught that.
Was it?
Yes, it was. Well,
Dwight, what was his name?
Dwight Clark. Yeah, you're talking about the catch in 1982 NFC Championship game against the Cowboys, January 10th of that year, and Vin Scully did the play-by-play at Candlestick Park. You know, when he beat Everson Walls.
Yeah, I think that's when Sam Weiss was a coach there. He kind of coached Montana.
Well, the coach of the 49ers back then was Bill Walsh, and Forrest Gregg had coached the Bengals in Super Bowl 16.
Yeah, I say Sam was the kind of quarterback coach for the 49ers back when Montana played.
But I'm sure those were some great get-togethers with you and Gaylord Perry and Bobby Richardson and Billy Odell and Sam White. That's got to be some great get-togethers. And Bobby Bolin, you have been a great guest, and I really want to thank you for all of your time. And thank you to you, the listeners, as well, for listening to this interview. Until next time, I'm Corey Stolzenbach. Take care, everybody.